Great. Well, thank you so very much, Kim, for that warm welcome. And thank you so much to Tom and everyone at the ANA in New York City. This is my first event with you, so I'm very, very excited to share a little bit more about one of my favorite topics, which is all around experience. And I think it's a topic that we often don't, really talk about enough. It's something where we talk about brand experience, we talk about customer experience, but do we talk a lot about employee experience? And I think the three are interlinked. And today I'm going to share a whole lot of information and stats to get us all thinking about where we as marketers can really grow our definition of experience end to end. So that is what I'll be talking about today. And again, thank you so very much for having me. So let me start off by saying that 74% of employees said that their time spent during the lockdown, and for those of us in New York City, we all know that that was, very tough. Some of us in apartments, and we're debating if we were going to stay in the city or not. I think it was a time of great sort of reassessment and a time of reflection. And the stats speak the truth. 74% of employees said that they were really thinking about their careers and rethinking those careers overall. 54% of Gen Z employees are considering leaving their current employer now. And I don't think that this is any surprise. And certainly in other categories and generations, I think we're seeing those numbers even higher. It is this time that I think is so unique to what's happened with all of us, this collective human experience that we've had coming out of the pandemic. And this really brings me to a key point around the Great Resignation. I loved this sort of notion of the Great Resignation and how it all got us thinking about our jobs and what was important to us. And not that I love that people were leaving their jobs, but really just this idea that everyone collectively, it was one of those era defining phrases that, what matters, what is, we all talk about purpose and about well-being and a state of really thinking about what matters to us in life. And I think that was evidenced by the fact that, and this came from a Forbes article, where in record numbers in America, people were quitting their jobs 4 months straight. Which led to 4 million Americans quitting their jobs in July. That has increased, obviously, now as we end the year. And in January, I think there's notion that this would be worse, as people get to the end of year and really thinking about a new year, things like bonuses and waiting for certain, financial payments to come. I think, we're seeing that this could potentially be worse as we step into 2022. On the flip side of that, we know that companies with a high level of employee engagement are more profitable. So there's this, these opposing notions of we see all these, people leaving their jobs. So they're clearly not engaged, but we know that there's 23% more profitability when your company and your employees are engaged, 10% increase in customer loyalty and engagement. So that interlink between employee experience and customer experience. 81% reduce absenteeism, which I think is so important as we look, especially with frontline work and, a lot of our frontline service heroes and workers, that's really important to have a reduced absenteeism, especially at scale. And an 18% decrease in high turnover organizations. In organizations like call centers, BPO, you can sometimes have as much as 15-20% turnover in 1 month. And so you think about, all the call centers and all the customer service centers that we call into, there's often lots of turnover and attrition, in those companies. So again, we see that there's this issue with the Great Resignation. We see that employees are not engaged, and it really does have a direct impact on performance and business outcomes. And shockingly, I know a lot of people don't like to admit this, but it's the numbers show us from a Gallup in 2020 that 85% of employees, probably at your organization, are not as engaged as they could be. So it's a staggering number, and I think something to really look at. So what's really at stake? I think it's pretty clear we're seeing this record number of the Great Resignation, people quitting in droves. A lot of people are, again, citing mental health and well-being, looking for a better experience, a better work-life integration. And again, this has been really, exacerbated. Things that were always actually, if you look at the numbers, there was this great Business Insider article that actually showed that a lot of these stats were already moving in this direction. But there was this forcing function with the pandemic that pushed that forward. Of course, at an overall level, this has stakes around customer experience. We see a 3% growth in 1-year gross profit margin for companies that have a strong EX, or employee experience and engagement. And 76% of employees say that their experience has improved their ability to provide a great customer experience. And I think we all have personal examples, whether it's your favorite airline or your favorite retail store, your favorite hotel, whatever it may be, where you know that happy and engaged employees, that translates to how they interact with you as a customer. My favorite airline, and some of you may or may not disagree, is Delta Airlines. And I think they provide an amazing, experience. And a lot of that is because of how happy their employees are. In terms of what's at stake for us as marketeers, it's our brands, brand reputation, and damage to our brands potentially. Data and studies show that there is a link to that with a result of a poor employee experience. And then also 62% of HR leaders have seen positive impacts to their brand reputation as a result of an improved employee experience. And I'm not just talking about, making your career page look great, or some light employee career branding. I think this is such an opportunity for brands to really think about how can you, and I think some companies do this really well, but how can you really up-level your employee experience engagement to up-level your overall brand? And I would even, pose that if you want to look at, revamping your brand, does that start with a great employee experience and brand first? And I really do think there's this interlink or this connection across those things. So again, I think that there's no mistaking that these things are interlinked. I don't think you can separate this notion of a great employee experience, a great customer experience, and a great brand experience. And in so many ways, because 80% of customers will change brands because of a bad experience, I think our employees are our organization, and we have to make sure that we're providing that great experience for them as well, and talking about that as well. And, more, great stats from Gallup, companies with highly engaged employees outperform their competitors at a staggering 147%. So again, I'm sharing a lot of these data points, which, may or may not be surprising, but a good reminder for us that it is often a place we don't look. So for me, again, a greater EX really does drive a great CX. I also sit as a chair of the ANA CX committee with Rob Markey, and we talk a lot about, what is customer experience in this economy, in this era as marketeers. And I think more and more we're going to see a trend towards thinking about that interlink with employees, which often to me, again, has been about HR. And, that's an HR thing, or it's about a careers brand and an employee brand. But I think, again, you see in the previous, session, Salesforce was brought up as a great example of brand. And, make no mistake, they have been very, very purposeful as you think about Trailblazer and that amazing brand experience that they have. That's also, part of their employee experience end to end, and it's all interlinked. And I really do believe that this is an area as marketers, especially in this time that we're in with the great resignation and the market being what it is, where people can go wherever they want these days. How do we take advantage of that as marketers, and especially in B2B? So I would again pose that, let's stop focusing on the great resignation. Let's focus on a great re-engagement. I think the time is now that we need to stop reading, the New York Times and, HBR and The Economist and all of these, and again, I think we've talked about it so much, especially in our space around experience and performance engagement of our employees, where I work at Centrical. We are talking now about how do we flip the script and really look at this great re-engagement of employees. And there's many tools that check on the wellness and the engagement of employees at companies. You think of Qualtrics or Culture Amp or Peakon. And one that I'll share, with Centrical is this notion of wellness insights of your employees all the time, and listening, understanding, and acting on the needs of your employees. And I think a lot of times we do this in regular, either some companies do a once a year pulse survey, some maybe do every quarter, every half, but I would argue, just like we manage the insights of our customers as marketers, we need to be looking at what are our employees thinking and how does that tie to what we need to express as brands. And whether it's things like daily wellness checkpoints, I saw this amazing notion of the stay interview, and based on the insights of your employees, what are you asking them in terms of not, coming into the company, but what are you going to do to stay at the organization? Or can you re-recruit your employees and think about, kind of almost re-recruiting them in a new and different way, especially, in the time that we're in. So this sort of notion of sentiment, of checking in on employee feelings, checking in on their wellness and well-being, I think is really critical to understanding employee engagement at the companies that we serve, but also in our own company. A few quotes from, every employee around the world that we hear often is, "I felt unaccomplished," or "I was left unfulfilled," or "I was really unhappy and I stopped having fun. I hit a dead end where I stopped learning and growing," or "I wanted something more challenging and fulfilling." And I think all of us have been in a situation where we knew that it was time, because our engagement in the current place that we were at was starting to wane. And so I think this is really critical, again, just from a pure leadership perspective, but again, thinking about this connection and this notion of EX, CX, and brand experience and how they're interlinked. Do we have a finger on the pulse of, what's happening, within our organizations? And so I wanted to kind of share just really quickly, from a technology perspective, how you think about what's in the pink circle here about, what we want employees to want to talk about when they talk about their jobs. Like, "I love my job. I hit my targets. I have an opportunity to grow. I'm uniquely supported. I'm recognized." And do we have the tools, the insights, the data to be able to look at, real-time performance or micro-learning, unlearning, relearning, upskilling? Do we make it fun through things like gamification? Is there those well-being check-ins that help us listen, understand, and act? And are we coaching in the flow of work so that our employees aren't waiting for that once a year performance review and thinking about, how we do that? So this is, the model at Centrical with the solutions that we offer. But again, I think this is an overall best practice on how to holistically inspire, guide, and motivate employees and make sure that their experience in our organizations are great. And sort of as I wrap up here today, I know I'm CMO here at Centrical now, but, fairly new here. So haven't had a ton of time to be able to do this here at Centrical, but I wanted to highlight, I was at SAP 15 years and with SuccessFactors most recently. And what we did is we turned this notion of employee experience and the engagement that our own employees had at SuccessFactors into a brand campaign. There was a lot of listening, understanding, and acting on the needs of employees at that time. And it was all about how do you experience wins in a time where everyone was in lockdown, in a time where people weren't sure what to do. And we talked about the stories of our own employees at an external brand campaign level. And the name of the campaign was called Experience Wins. And we recorded, at-home videos of employees playing guitar, lifting weights, being with their kids, opening up swag boxes. And we turned this into an overall end-to-end brand campaign with, digital, paid media, social posts, and it was a sort of a community engagement where customers and HR influencers also were part of this. And it was a very successful campaign in terms of overall interaction and all of the metrics that we were looking at for this campaign. But again, it tied to the overall brand experience of SuccessFactors, and it was a way for employees to get involved in that. I think other companies that do this really well, again, are Salesforce, as an example of really highlighting and spotlighting the brand of their employees as part of their external brand. So in summary, I think that it's important to remember that a great customer experience really begins with a great employee experience. EX has a direct effect on brand. Marketing leaders that are looking to make a lasting impact on their overall brand, I think often overlook a place that we can start is where our own employees are and how do we bring them into our brand. And remember, it all begins with listen, understand, and act. I think if we don't have the insights on what employees and customers are thinking, we as marketeers don't have the full picture. And I think it's a great place to start in terms of really being able to understand those insights. So I hope that I've been able to give you a little bit of inspiration today around thinking of the end-to-end experience and how as marketers, we can truly tie EX to CX and to our brand experience. So with that, Kim, I'll pass it back to you and to see if there's any questions at all.
April, I'm sure there's a ton of questions. We're going to limit it to one. One thing I want to say to you from those of us at Deloitte, this resonates so much. I love the idea of the great re-engagement. So I got a question for you around the concept of stay in interviews and re-recruiting people. Can you tell us a little bit more of what that really looks like?
Yeah, so great question. I think that, so much of the old way of thinking about employee and experience and engagement has been about, that employees should sort of be thankful and happy to have a job. And, we kind of forget the fact that, they can, especially in this time, choose many places to go. And I think it's a very unique time in history where we have to be honest with ourselves about they may not stay, so a stay interview is kind of getting proactive to say, where are you at and what can we do as an organization to make sure that you're engaged and make sure that you stay with the organization. It's a very different notion because it puts the employee at the center of that discussion and not the employer. And I think, again, a little bit awkward for some companies, I think, but I think if you can push yourself to think about that stay interview, I think, and again, you could call it whatever you want, but I think that the notion is, how are you checking in and engaging with your employees so that you can improve your retention and avoid attrition of employees? And then re-recruiting is, again, a check-in on, the skills that brought you here, may not be the skills that we need to go forward. And let's re-recruit the current employees that we have that have had tenure, that have been with us a long time. When I was at SAP, we sort of re-recruited our own employees to think about how they could pivot from event marketing to digital marketing. And I think, again, it's thinking about these notions of putting employees at the center of work and making sure that they have the opportunity to stay and grow and reskill and upskill within their current environment. So hopefully those are two ideas that can help all of us as marketers as we think about the very, very important notion of employee engagement. And I do believe that as marketers, it goes far beyond HR, and we need to be part of that to improve our overall brand experience and recognition.
Couldn't agree more. Really superb session. Thank you, April.
Thank you so much.